Some games are really quite difficult. That's all I gotta say about that one, actually.
Different people want different experiences from a video game, and one of the best things about gaming nowadays is that there's almost certainly a game out there that can give you what you want. So, for the group of people out there who think that some games are too easy, there's a heap of titles that will make you weep like a little girl. Some of them can be enjoyable as you fight your war of attrition, while some, a select few, are the closest that gaming has ever come to sadism. And bear in mind this is taking the game as a whole into consideration, not just a special hard mode that makes an otherwise manageable game borderline impossible. There's enough games out there that aren't hard due to glitches or hard on a certain difficulty to fill a dozen of these videos. And fuck if I'm making more than one video on this topic. Give it a year or two. So let's start out slowly, by which I mean let's start with one of the fastest games on this list. F-Zero games before the switch to 3D were always a little tricky due to the incredible sense of speed they gave you, requiring lightning fast reactions to avoid crashing into walls too many times. Giving these games an extra dimension, and even more speed, just sounds like a recipe for a fiery death. And if you're as talented as I am at F-Zero GX, that happened quite often. A great modern philosopher once said that you've gotta go fast, but really only when you've got a modicum of control, otherwise you'll just keep dying. F-Zero GX is a lot of fun on some of the earlier levels, but as you progress further and take on some of story mode's more asinine challenges, where the margin for error is a fraction of what it used to be, the joy tends to wear a little thin. Though, mind you, the payoff is huge if you have the patience. Like with a lot of games on here, watching a speedrun of F-Zero GX is both exhilarating and incredibly demoralizing. Chapter 6 is still a pain in the butt, and I won't even mention the final chapter, and that's not because I'm avoiding spoilers. It's too traumatic. I'm sure it's manageable by some, but me? I just don't have the skill.
It's generally accepted by the gaming masses that retro games are significantly harder than modern games, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe you didn't quite know the best way of making a game, you did it deliberately so the game got lots of playtime out of their game, or maybe that's just how you wanted to make your game.
Anyone who's played through some, if not all of the 8-bit Mega Man games will attest to their difficulty. It fluctuates a bit from game to game, not every game in the series has something like the Yellow Devil to get through, but they'll offer the kind of challenge you should come to expect from that era of gaming. But then, about 12 years after the release of the last main series Mega Man game, Capcom gave the world Mega Man 9. And then Mega Man 9 gave the world some chronic aneurysms. I think the problem with this game is it tries a little too hard to match the difficulty you'd anticipate from a Mega Man game, and instead goes way past where it should be. Whether it's Inafune and his crew deliberately screwing with gamers who might have gotten used to regenerating health and linearity in modern gaming, or if 12 years of bottled up creative sadism all came out in one go, Mega Man 9 is not one to take prisoners. And in between brutal boss fights and cheap deaths that seem to come out of nowhere, it certainly feels retro. Just not in a pleasing way. If you give someone free rein to make whatever kind of game they want, you end up with some weird and wonderful concoctions that can really show what kind of creative minds are out there. You also end up with games that should never be games, but that's a different matter. Super Meat Boy is the best indie game I've ever played, or at least it was until Undertale came along. I always liked how Super Meat Boy put the focus of each death on you, and how each time you fucked something up, there was no one to blame but yourself. The controls were tight and responsive, and you respawned immediately after you died, so you felt less inclined to rage quit during a loading screen. But still, you die in one hit and everything that moves, and a lot of stuff that doesn't move, can kill you. Even with the controls as good as they are, it does take a lot of patience to beat this one, and even more so if you go after some of the extras. Out of all the games on this list though, I'd say that this is the least frustrating. Sure, you'll get stuck quite often and you'll literally die thousands of times in pursuit of those end credits, but you might just have fun in the process. Certainly, if you like your platformers oozing with challenge, you needn't look any further. Although maybe you shouldn't rule out the possibility that you can experience a harder platformer if you're willing to compromise on the whole respecting you thing. A platformer where you don't get infinite lives to burn through. A platformer where you can't just pick and choose the levels as you feel. Indeed, a platformer so hard that famously the crazy Japanese people who made it deemed it too difficult for the Western world. At which point you all know it's Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, so I'll stop that.
It's worth remembering that the original Super Mario Bros. Is not an easy game. Certainly, if you don't manage your lives properly, you will come unstuck in a lot of places. But what kind of thought process is, hey, how about for the sequel, we ignore all that intelligent level design we had and just be dicks? What kind of world does that work in?
Seriously, if you came across one of these levels in Super Mario Maker, you'd immediately hate the creator for thinking up something so cheap and diabolical. But putting enemies where there shouldn't be enemies wasn't the only thing this game did. It also threw in the poison mushroom to really fuck with you. When you introduce something to a successful formula that only serves to trip you up, we're now dramatically veering towards dick move territory. Oh, and there's also level warps that send you further back in the game. There's a point where difficulty starts to become mean-spirited, and even in some of Mario's tricky moments, the player was given a bit of reverence. The Lost Levels feel like a fan-made hack, and considering it came from the same people who made the first game, that's pretty fucking appalling. So about 2 years ago I was browsing Steam for a game to play and distract me from making YouTube videos when I stumbled across a cheap little title called Super Hexagon. Reviews said it was good, something about impressive minimalist design and addictive gameplay. Oh yeah, and it's also ball-crushingly hard. The best way to describe Super Hexagon is to think of a bullet hell game where the attacks come from every direction, except the attacks are just walls you need to avoid, and you can only move around in a circle pivoted to the center of the screen. Also, it's apparently set to a rhythm, but I was too busy concentrating like my very existence was on the line on this tiny triangle which you need to navigate through all of this shit. When you're focusing this hard on something so small that blends in so well with the things you're trying to avoid, and how everything is constantly spinning, and how the music is so trippy, and how some of the color changes can really throw you off, this is one of the very few games out there that has caused me physical pain. A lengthy session of staring at this game like a dog would stare at bacon left my eyes screaming for mercy. So I went and played Kirby's Epic Yarn instead. You can't even die in that game. Pound for pound, I would say that the Ninja Gaiden series holds the coveted title of being the hardest set of games in gaming. A lot of entries on here are a mere difficulty blip and an otherwise calm sea of calm things. But Ninja Gaiden set the standard with the first game and just kept making new games to that very same standard. And so, like F-Zero, what was quite difficult in 2 dimensions became something a little insane with an added 3rd dimension. Ninja Gaiden Black is an enhanced version of Ninja Gaiden, which is just the name they gave to the 3D revival of the series in 2004. What they enhanced with this release of the game was of course the difficulty. Actually, I think they added some new modes or something, but who cares. What you're left with is a devilishly quick combat system with such a high skill ceiling that it really is a sight to behold if you can master it. If you can't, you'll probably have your butt handed to you by any one of the fast attacking enemies that can turn you into mincemeat in a matter of seconds. I guess if we judge the game on how well it made the switch from 2D to 3D, it must be said that it certainly matches and in places surpasses the difficulty of the NES games. And there's no fucking birds, that's a bonus. Very few people have ever played Dark Souls. As it turns out, while a lot of people put the disc in their machines or download it off Steam or whatever with the intention of playing it, what actually transpires is less of a play session and more holding on for dear life. And yet, Dark Souls isn't the sort of game you'd buy on impulse. This is one of those rare experiences in gaming where you seek out this game, knowing exactly what you're about to get yourself in for. In a way, it makes the difficulty less of a surprise, but it doesn't in any way make it easier for you. Dark Souls is a love-hate relationship. When you're dropped into this world full of enemies that can kill you in a heartbeat, very little is explained to you. The story is fed to you slowly, there's no real tutorial to speak of, and you're given no information on how the enemies fight. Quite a lot of what you learn from Dark Souls comes from every single death you have at the hands of these monsters. It's not necessarily a harsh game, but it may just get you thinking a bit differently about how to approach a challenge in a video game. And with this kind of opposition, the reward you get when you string everything together is unbelievably satisfying. With every failure, the eventual victory gets sweeter and sweeter. I feel like we take jumping for granted when it shows up in gaming, especially when you can take control where you end up in the middle of your jumping arc. This is more of a Mario thing, but then again, the guy can jump higher with each successive jump. It's not entirely realistic. So I guess in a way, Ghosts and Goblins is the pinnacle of video game realism. Alright, maybe not. This game gives me a headache, and not in the same way as Super Hexagon did. I'm sure Ghosts and Goblins could have been a good game if they toned down parts of it, but instead, poor old Arthur here has to make it through levels where you're bombarded with attacks from every direction. And maybe this wouldn't be as much of a problem if Arthur had some decent defense to him. He is wearing a suit of armor after all. But apparently it's the flimsiest bit of chainmail in history, because just one hit will strip Arthur down to his underwear. One more and he's dead. So this is a game where you focus on keeping your clothes on. It's like Hoonie Pop in reverse. If only if it was half as fun as it sounds. Oh yeah, and that jumping. It's like you're on the moon. It's Wolfenstein New Order 29 years earlier. Where are these fucking Nazis at? And if you want the true ending, if you really want some validation for spending a lot of time with this game, you have to play the whole game again from the beginning on a higher difficulty. No, I have dreams of my own, Ghosts and Goblins. I'm gonna go see the world, make them laugh, make them cry, and all this time you're still gonna be telling me to play you again. Never, never again. I've been talking a little bit about the distinction between a game being hard and respecting the gamer, and a game being hard and treating the player like shit. The former feels more like a test of your skill as a gamer, while the latter often resembles a test of patience and staying power. With a better understanding of what gamers like in a tricky game, you could say that modern games are more suited to offering a fair challenge. Except if your name is I Wanna Be The Guy. Okay fine, it came out in 2007, but I Wanna Be The Guy is in no way designed to play like a modern game. It deliberately parodies some of the most unforgiving titles of yesteryear. Games like Mega Man, Ghosts and Goblins, Castlevania, Metroid, the list goes on. Basically it's like making a soup where the only ingredients are a variety of different chilies. It's supposed to be hard. More importantly, I Wanna Be The Guy is supposed to be unfair. In fact, the only reason why you might play it is if to see if it deserves its reputation. Or maybe to have your nostalgia ruined by these horrendously cruel levels.
I Wanna Be The Guy is a real experience of a game. Very rarely do you ever come across a game that uses such cheap tactics to get rid of you, but it does it in somewhat familiar circumstances. You haven't lived until you've had to avoid falling into Tronimos or fought giant Hadouken-breathing Zangief. It's one of those games.
Stop the presses, we have a late breaking news story. It has been officially confirmed by some random guy on YouTube whose opinion isn't worth toodles that Battletoads is the undisputed champion of video game difficulty. And really, what the fuck were you expecting? Every time I think more about this game, I find more things to be baffled by. Yes, in the mid-1980s there was still an issue of a game feeling lengthy enough to warrant a purchase. But games like Castlevania and Mega Man managed this with a degree of dignity. Battletoads, which incidentally came out in 1991, just dives headfirst into a pool of suffering and anguish, and the best part is it didn't need to. The first couple of levels of Battletoads are alright. It actually shows off the game's pretty decent beat-em-up engine. The problems start to snowball around Turbo Tunnel, and if you're any sort of self-respecting gamer, that name will immediately trigger alarms in your head. It requires insanely quick reaction speed, and failure will result in an instant kill. But suppose you get past that. It is only the game's third level. What kind of joys await you in the rest of the game? Well, there's another 10 levels to go, my friend, and none of them let up on the difficulty. You've got your token ice level, a surfboard level, a snake level with insta-kill spikes, a jet plane level that practically mirrors Turbo Tunnel, a vertical level where falling is an insta-kill, a pipe level where virtually everything kills you in one hit, another vertical level where one mistake will kill you, a level with whatever the hell this is, where one mistake will kill you, yet another vertical level where poisonous gas, spike balls and falling is an instant kill, and then the fucking final boss. You've got 3 lives. Good luck, chump.
This has been RabbidLuigi, and Battletoads is maybe the only game where I'm legitimately surprised where people say they've beaten it without using cheats, which is never a good thing to have in a game unless you intend that to be the case from the outset. And also, bear in mind that this game was made by Rare a few years before they made much more forgiving titles like Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day. Who was it who was continually shitting in their lunch in the early 1990s?
Hello everybody, hope you enjoyed that. Bit of a rush to get this video out, but I wanted to get a top 10 out before Halloween, especially since Halloween is next week and I've got other plans for that. This was my first top 10 since the end of July, so, you know, it's kind of overdue. But anyway, quite a few things are happening over the next couple of weeks, so you might want to check out my Twitter and Facebook if you want to keep abreast of everything. Just in case anything spooky happens.